Are you an independent musician feeling overwhelmed by the endless act of juggling creativity, business, and self-care? You're not alone. That's why I created the Artist Mind Map. The Artist Mind Map is a free blueprint designed to help you get clear on the route you need to take to attain your career goals in alignment to your artistic values. This is not just another random PDF page for the forgotten corners of your hard disk. It's a timeless roadmap you can use for decades to come. Think of it as a go-to overview to consult. When you grab your free mind map, you get exclusive access to a masterclass that will take your career to the next level. I use the same methodologies and systems for my high-end paying clients and students. So why am I giving it to you for free? Simple. I want to build a community of artists who can count on each other for safe spaces. Music saved my life. I believe that you have all that it takes to be the artist you were meant to be, if you're willing to put in the work. And more importantly, understanding what that work is. And the Artist Mind Map was designed to help you do exactly that. If this resonates with you, go to artistmindmap.com and download this resource. artistmindmap.com.
Alright, let's talk about something I've never heard enough people unpack properly. This idea that artists will always be poor. Now, this is not a motivational talk, and it's not some romantic, tortured artist worship either. It's also not some strange offer about six-figure incomes. This is kind of personal and based on lived experience and some research I've been doing on this. Some background info. I come from a post-colonial family. For those of you who might not be familiar with that term, a heritage which was under colonized rule and is a little emphatic about their freedom and the cultural connotations that come with. What this means for me, in context to what I want to talk about today, is that I grew up around people who were generous, deeply cultured, spiritually rich, but also navigating the aftershocks of systems that stripped entire generations of their financial stability and even dignity. The whole environment I grew up around, there was a lot of beauty. My parents went out of the way to provide very well for me, but there was always an undertone of survival. Money in my life was never absent, but it was never neutral either. There was always pressure involved, pride, grief. And then when you grow up across borders like I did, where the value of a currency changes depending on where you land, you start to realize very quickly that money isn't real in the way a lot of people tend to think it is. There is a story behind it. In fact, the concept of money in itself is a bit of a story, a system of agreements that doesn't always hold the same weight for everyone. Add to it some religion, some messaging around money being greedy or evil. Add to it art school myths that real artists suffer, musicians are always supposed to rough it out, that true integrity means never charging too much, that if you're any good, you'll either die broke or be famous once you're not around to enjoy it. Meanwhile, with the music industry swinging wildly from rockstar fantasies of the past, where rock bands used to have their private jets, to a streaming era of starvation diet where we're all meant to hustle for the next opportunity. This topic, it runs deep. And today I want to say a few things about it. Not necessarily to prove anything, not to justify, not defend, but to offer what will hopefully be some clarity. Because the deeper I go into this work, both as an artist and a mentor, the more obvious it becomes that the poverty we're taught to fear might not be the one that actually costs us the most. Let's get into it.
Welcome to another session solo cast. These solo casts are designed to help independent artists and musicians like you navigate the very complex labyrinth that is your artistic practice and career. They're based on empirical research and experiences of my own career as an independent musician and an educator and coach working with artists just like you. The primary aim behind these sessions is to offer accessibility to the kind of education many of us need to work with in order to forward ourselves in these very confusing times as empowered and independent artists in the truest sense of the word.
The myth of money. There's a phrase that follows artists like a shadow. You'll never make real money doing that. Or a more adult-sounding cousin. Artists will always be poor. The implication is clear. To choose art is to forfeit security. But here's the thing. When you look closer at what's considered wealth in modern society, the metrics get murky fast. Most of what people chase under the label of success, money, scale, reach, are not rooted in anything material at all. I'm gonna use an excerpt from the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. Here goes. The sum total of money in the world is about 60 trillion. Yet the sum total of coins and banknotes is less than 6 trillion. More than 90% of all money, more than 50 trillion appearing in our accounts, exists only on computer servers. Most business transactions are executed by moving electronic data from one computer file to another, without any exchange of physical cash. Only a criminal buys a house, for example, by handing over a suitcase full of banknotes. Now, if you go to the blog post, you can read through that quote to let it land. Quite some information there, worthy of taking note. Money as we use it today is an abstraction, a shared fiction even. It's real because we believe in it, not because it actually physically exists. And yet that fiction dictates who gets to speak, create, rest, or survive. What we're really chasing, though, is a very different story. Ask most people what they do with money, and you won't get numbers. You'll get feelings. I want to feel secure. I want to feel respected. I want to finally have time. I want to do something that matters. I want to feel that I can afford whatever I want to. If you think about it, these aren't really quote-unquote financial goals. They're emotional coordinates, ones that artists, ironically, have been navigating their entire lives, often without a roadmap. There's a divergence point though. There's a moment, usually post-education, either school education, college education, when the world forks. Some will go the path of calculated safety. Salaries, hierarchies, corporate world, compliance. Well, a certain brand of compliance anyway. Usually others, artists, will usually ask different questions at this crossroad. And if they're anything like me, which I would bet they are, they'll be asking this. What would I still do if no one paid me? What would I still do if no one paid me? That might sound like a romantic question, kind of dangerous, the kind of thing society might find disruptive. And it's also the kind of question that's not the easiest to monetize per se. But These are the questions that people in their 40s, 50s, 60s often will eventually ask, usually after a health scare, an affair, or a burnout, or some kind of crash that blows their usual success narrative to pieces. Artists, on the other hand, get to that question first. That crossroad I referred to earlier on, we're asking not how we can get secure, but what would I still do if no one paid me? Paper wealth, which is what money is still traditionally symbolized by, it burned fast. In a world obsessed with appearances, paper wealth has become a kind of social armor historically. But to quote a metaphor, well, state a metaphor anyway, I'm not sure this is a quote, paper burns quickly when things get real. If you have a look at the recent collapse of public figures, CEOs and thought leaders who once looked really good on LinkedIn or their TED Talks, many of them had the numbers. What they didn't necessarily have was a nervous system that could hold the life they'd built. Meanwhile, artists, often living on much tighter margins, would develop emotional muscles early. Now, this is not to say that we're experts at regulating our nervous systems either, but certain experiences like learning to sit with a very intimate form of rejection, making peace with ambiguity, staying close to truth when trends reward convenience. These are skills that all don't translate to income conveniently or easily, but it does translate to a certain kind of resilience and, more importantly, alignment that today's world is finally acknowledging the importance of. There's an irony here involved, which is just so bitter. Many of today's wealthiest creators, bropreneurs, and manifestation mentors preach starting where artists were building all along. Presence, integration, meaningfulness. Some even cite artists as examples to follow. Now, on paper, six-figure numbers sound good, but not everyone asks what they really cost. Artists might look poor in comparison to some on paper, though, by the way, that is not a hard and fast rule. But the thing is, our souls will only tolerate that many lies. And paper burns fast in real fire. Also, have you read the papers recently? In case you're wondering if I'm saying that poor is okay for artists, and what a cliche that is, by the way, I'm not. In fact, on the contrary, I'm saying you're likely far wealthier than you already realize. You're sitting on wealth, just not in the way society taught you to measure it. You've probably never been given full credit for what you already carry. Let's start with that. Your real assets are familiarity with genuine fulfillment, soul-level alignment. Most billionaires lose their minds trying to feel. An open heart uncolonized by reductionist philosophies posing as economic science, still guided primarily by the hangover of what is essentially the Industrial Revolution. So this, what I'm talking about, consider this an invitation to reassess the true value of all of these. So I guess a lot of people at this point would ask, should artists stay broke? And my reply to that is no, that's definitely not the point here. The point is, if you're an artist, my request to you is don't outsource your sense of worth to a system that wasn't built for your blueprint. Yes, learn to earn. Yes, build systems that support you. But do it from inner congruence, not reaction. Just because someone has 6 figures on their sales page doesn't mean they have 6 minutes of true inner stillness. You don't have to become someone else to be worthy, which is where you need to start. You need to see differently. That's what you were trained for. That's what artists have always done long before we had data. We had something way bigger, a vision. So what about actually making money? Yeah, hopefully this is what you're wondering or thinking about. And it's a fair question. But would you believe this? That one, your ability to generate income is a skill that you might be a lot more qualified to do than you realize? Would you believe me if I told you that it also depends a lot more on your internal orientation than some marketing hack people might be offering you? And I'll explain why. When your subconscious runs on recognition instead of panic, self-recognition being the kind of recognition I'm referring to, you start seeing options you couldn't see before. There's an ancient Sanskrit quote which goes tat tvam asi. I apologize, I'm not sure I pronounced that right. It's been a while since I studied Sanskrit. It was only for a year, way back in the day in India. But what that translates to is that thou art. You are not separate from the reality you experience. Change how you see, and the world changes with you. That's a quote from the Upanishads. And if that sounds a little too woo-woo, that's absolutely fine. But this is where I'm going to tell you that there is actually a lot more science to this than most of us realize. The human brain is wired to identify, seek, and find more evidence to confirm its beliefs. Some call this confirmation bias. Others have made whole movies and near cult-like followings in the name of law of attraction, which I personally have my reservations about for reasons that aren't really relevant here. But neuroscience, on the other hand, confirms the one thing that many are simply not talking about, which is if your nervous system is hyperstimulated, in fight, flight, freeze mode, or just tired, its ability to identify possibilities suffers. It falls back on baseline functions that are simply primal survival instincts. Instincts meant to provide us with primal projection from ancient dangers like wild animals, natural catastrophes, starvation, not creativity. This is one major reason researchers have looked into why so-called countries who've already experienced poverty struggle to recover their wealth, because there's a generational trauma in there that's had a deep psychological impact on its masses, which tends to get underestimated. Again, different conversation, but either way, in that survival mode, your brain is simply not wired for creativity, which brings up the pertinent question every artist should ask first. Is the starving artist paradigm so deeply embedded in our psyche that it might be impairing our powers of observation, discernment? Let me repeat that question. Is the starving artist paradigm so deeply embedded in our psyche that it might be impairing our powers of observation? Forget law of attraction. How's that for a question to ask ourselves? Is it possible that we are part of a dichotomy wherein we dedicate our lives to creating art, but handicap ourselves when it comes to using the same skill to build wealth? So to come back to whether we're supposed to be the happy, starving artist, no, that's not what I'm getting at all, to reiterate. But what it does mean is that bropreneur, the manifestation mom giving you life advice from a beach, they probably don't even know what you do, how powerful you are. And not everything they say applies to you. It is your responsibility to understand your power, because you've been farther ahead than you were ever taught to believe. Ask this before chasing anyone else's dream. Do they actually have what you started building years ago? Have they ever written a song that can make someone cry? Painted a picture that transports? Because honestly, if they didn't, they have no fucking business inside your head as quote-unquote experts. Some of the people I've talked to, some of my colleagues, are the kind, not to generalize, who at this point are going to ask, this is great, but how is any of this going to help me pay rent? I'm glad you asked. And would you believe me if I said, in every way? Because when your subconscious runs on authentic self-recognition, not panic, you start seeing options you didn't know you had. And if that sounds like woo BS, fair play. Your call. Or maybe you're not using your biggest strength to its completion. Creativity. We create alternate realities from ideas that would have never existed without artists. Is that woo BS too? You decide. And in case you're wondering if this is all I have for today, no. I do offer more. There are strategies, frameworks, actionable steps. But for today, I want to leave you with this. Start here. Start here first, because in my world, the rest of it simply doesn't matter if this doesn't. Don't trade your compass for someone else's map, especially when theirs might have been an escape plan in the first place, not a way back home. The silence many run away from was where you started. It's your superpower. Use it. And just to be clear, this doesn't mean non-artists are lesser humans or nothing on those lines. Absolutely not. But never before has the artist been more definitive in humanity's destiny. It's unprecedented. So my sincere request to you is claim that role. Claim it. Claim your role before the metrics do. Parting thoughts. That phrase, artists will always be poor, that was never about truth. It's the one thing I can guarantee you. That's not an absolute truth. It was more about some vague general measurement. Something we've been conditioned to measure, except a lot of outcomes, a lot of wealth we gathered through art, values, fulfillment, those feelings which we think money is going to get us, they're not measurable in the traditional sense of the word. So when wealth is reduced to what fits on paper or computer data, what gets lost is everything that gives paper its value in the first place. Trust, feeling, attention, presence, meaningfulness. And artists have actually, with or without our conscious awareness, always dealt in those currencies. So, long story short, today's episode was definitely not a manifesto for staying broke. It's a reminder to not outsource your definition of worth to people still trying to buy their way out of the questions you've already faced. You are not behind, my friend. You're early. And in a collapsing world built on vanishing numbers, that might be the only real wealth left. I hope that helps.
Hey folks, I hope you found that episode helpful. Here's a little request. If you did, consider sharing this episode with your folks. Think about the ways in which they might benefit the way you did. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have queries. My name's TL. I'm an independent musician and educator and the founder of the Holistic Musician Academy.